All right, let's jump right into this explainer and explore one of the absolute biggest untapped geological mysteries hiding right under the Australian outback. In a world that's constantly hungry for energy security, we hear all the time about massive oil reserves in places like Texas or Saudi Arabia. But today, we're looking at a sedimentary basin in Western Australia that might just rival them. It's vast, it's ancient, and it's holding on to secrets that could completely transform the energy landscape as we know it. And when I say vast, I mean the Canning Basin is staggeringly huge. We're talking about a massive area covering 530,000 square kilometers. Just to wrap our heads around that, that is larger than the entire country of Spain. It's bigger than the Australian state of Victoria. Entire nations could comfortably fit inside its boundaries. But because it is literally so immense, actually mapping its true potential has proven incredibly difficult. So despite decades of geological work, and yes, actual physical oil discoveries, nobody can confidently answer this simple but multi-billion-dollar question. How much oil is actually buried down there? And remember, we aren't talking about some inaccessible resource hidden miles under the deep ocean. This is onshore. Drilling here is entirely possible. Part 1, the Great Outback Mystery. Now, when we look at this incredibly remote stretch running from the Kimberley deep into the Great Sandy Desert, we really need to establish something right off the bat. This is not just some theoretical resource. We aren't just guessing that oil might be there. Oil has actually already been discovered and produced here, specifically at fields like Ungani and Blina. Real wells have been drilled, they've encountered hydrocarbons, and the oil has flowed. The petroleum system is completely proven to work. So the mystery isn't if there's oil, but rather how much. Part 2, ingredients for an oil boom. To really grasp the potential here, we have to look at what petroleum geologists search for, basically the 4 essential ingredients for oil. First, you need source rocks, which are ancient sediments rich in organic matter. Second, you need intense heat and pressure over millions of years to cook that organic matter into hydrocarbons. Third, you need migration pathways so the oil can actually move. And finally, you need reservoirs and traps to catch and hold it. The Canning Basin possesses absolutely all 4 of these ingredients in spades. Millions of years ago, it was home to ancient seas and tropical reefs, which perfectly set the stage for all of this. Part 3, the Shale Revolution Effect. For the longest time, the Canning Basin was kind of just seen as an interesting conventional province. Before the early 2000s, the conventional view just totally ignored tight, impermeable rocks. Geologists knew there was oil in them, for sure, but they just couldn't get it out economically. But then, the shale revolution happened, and the post-shale view changed the game entirely. Suddenly, horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, unlocked massive production from these exact types of overlooked rocks. It's exactly what happened in the Bakken Formation in North Dakota. Overlooked, seemingly useless rocks literally became global powerhouses overnight. This incredible breakthrough practically had geologists sprinting back to the Canning Basin with a completely new mindset. They stopped looking just for conventional traps and zeroed right in on the source rock itself, specifically an organic-rich shale known as the Goldwire Formation. This specific formation stretches across massive portions of the basin, and studies are suggesting it generated enormous, almost unthinkable quantities of hydrocarbons. Part 4, the billion-barrel math. Okay, get ready for this number, 403 billion barrels. According to assessments by the U.S. Energy Information Administration, Australia's major shale basins collectively may contain around 403 billion barrels of oil in place. And the Canning Basin, it is widely regarded as one of the major contributors to that absolutely jaw-dropping national estimate. Now, hold on a second. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's define what that number actually means. Oil in place is simply the total volume of hydrocarbons physically trapped within the rocks. It's the absolute theoretical maximum of what exists down there. But importantly, this is completely different from what we can actually pump out of the ground and use. What really matters commercially is recoverable oil. This is the fraction of that total oil in place that can actually be extracted economically using our modern technology. And when we apply that realistic filter to Australia's shale, that massive 403 billion number drops down to about 17.5 billion barrels. But even with that drop, the staggering reality of that number really hits you when you put it into historical context. Let's compare Australia's greatest conventional oil discovery ever,
the Kingfish Field in Bass Strait, which has produced about 1 billion barrels in its entire lifetime. Now contrast that with the 17.5 billion barrel estimate for Australia's recoverable shale. Even after filtering down to just what is recoverable, the potential in these unconventional shale systems completely dwarfs Australia's biggest historical success. It's not even close.
You might be wondering, why does the number drop so drastically in the first place? Well, it's because in unconventional systems, recovery rates are notoriously low. But here's the kicker. The sheer scale of the Canning Basin means that even a super low recovery rate equals a massive, massive boom. Imagine the basin has 100 billion barrels of oil in place. Even a surprisingly low recovery rate of just 5% still yields 5 billion recoverable barrels. That alone would trigger one of the largest petroleum developments in Australian history. Part 5. Why is it untapped? So, the obvious question, if there is so much potential down there, and oil has already been proven to exist, why on earth hasn't it been fully exploited yet? Well, unlike Texas, which has a full century of established oil infrastructure, the Canning Basin faces some massive hurdles. First off, it is incredibly remote. We're talking distances measured in hours of driving on dirt tracks. That extreme remoteness means very limited infrastructure and extremely high drilling costs. Plus, unconventional drilling requires a lot of water, which is a huge challenge in the outback. And, rightly so, there are rigorous environmental approvals and cultural heritage considerations that demand very careful, deliberate management. This creates a really fascinating dilemma. You see, exploration companies have finite budgets, right? They need a clear path to profitability. So from a strictly commercial perspective, uncertainty is incredibly expensive. But for the scientists, from a geological perspective, that same uncertainty is absolutely irresistible. And that precise push and pull tension has defined the Canning Basin for decades. Oh, and it gets better. Adding another incredible layer to this mystery, it is not just about the shale. The basin also contains ancient Devonian reef complexes. Hundreds of millions of years ago, these were vibrant tropical reefs. Today, their incredibly porous structures are fully capable of hiding massive undiscovered conventional reservoirs. Around the world, ancient reefs just like these host some of the most spectacular oil fields ever found. Could there be giants hiding under the Australian dirt? We just don't know for sure. So let's lay it all out. When we put all these pieces together, a pretty stark contrast emerges. On one hand, we have our knowns. We know the oil definitely exists. We know the source rocks did their job, and we know the sheer scale is vast. But on the other hand, our unknowns are massive. The total recoverable volume is a complete mystery. The presence of hidden reef reservoirs is a huge question mark, and true commercial viability is unproven. Because there hasn't been an intense, large-scale drilling campaign, the subsurface is really only lightly illuminated. Imagine, if you will, trying to evaluate a gold province larger than the state of Victoria by only digging a handful of holes. You might find some gold, sure, but you couldn't possibly claim to understand the whole region. That is exactly the Canning Basin today. We simply cannot know yet if the massive resource estimates are somehow overstated, or if this truly is one of the largest unconventional petroleum accumulations on Earth, just sitting there, waiting for the drill bit. So, I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to wrap up our explainer today. With its giant scale, proven oil, ancient reefs, and organic-rich shale, is the Canning Basin hiding resources measured in the hundreds of billions? Has Australia barely even begun to scratch the surface of what is buried right beneath the red dirt? The ingredients are absolutely all there. Now it's just a matter of who is willing to solve the mystery.